I am your host, Carrie Scollin, giving us different perspectives on where we are and where we want to go on our journey. Thanks for being here, and I look forward to spending some time with you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FoundHer series. My name is Carrie Scollin, and I will be your host today. I have all my guests mean something to me, but sometimes some just are a little bit closer to the heart. That's who I have today. My dear friend, Sharon Hobenshield Ha-Youly. That is your name that you go by. I am so thrilled that you're here to share with us what the Indigenous gift giving, what it means to you, and really help us understand what it means in your culture and the values that you that it brings. And I wanted to start off just by sharing a little piece of, I read an article and I have a book that you gave me that I absolutely love. Actually, let's get you on screen first and then I'll share that. So welcome, Sharon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you. One of the books that you gave me is this book, which I love this book. I keep it out because I can pick this up and read something and see something different in it every time I read the words. And I heard something about that you can go back and read something, and it's not that the words have changed, but it's you have changed. You interpret the words, and I love that. And a lot of the words that I think you use, and I've read, and the article that you wrote, and really to me what you embody as a person, just knowing you personally. I want to just read some of those words out for you. Loved, belonging, witnessing, values, gratitude, respect. I know mind, body, spirit is extremely important. Community, conversations, listening and learning, being open, and I love the word honoring. So those are just words that struck me, and I don't want to make it small, but it sums up to me just so much of who you are and a piece of you. And so I want to share that with you. And now I welcome you to come in and share your story. And I know that you did your thesis on Indigenous gift giving and what that means. So I would just love to hear what you have to say.
Sure.
And where do you want to start?
Yeah.
I think it goes back a long ways from the sounds of it.
Yes, it does. And thank you for those kind words. And I'm just, thrilled to be here having the conversation with you, and something that's so important to me. And just, again, has been such a big part of my life. And that I think so. First of all, just start off with some protocol, and that's so I'm Sharon Hobenshield. Traditional name is Ha-Youly, and I come from the House of Malik in the Gitxsan First Nations, which is located in northern British Columbia, and that's on my mother's side. And then on my father's side, I have German Austrian roots. So I've always worked and walked in what we call two worlds, and I feel the benefits of both of those worlds, and so fortunate, I think, to have those experiences. But certainly, I think growing up was very much connected to my mom's family and culture. We lived in close proximity to my grandparents, who were actually her grandparents, but they raised her. So she considered them mom and dad, and I considered them my grandparents. And so, and I think, again, back to, of course, as you grow back older and you reflect back on your values and the foundation for how you want to live your life. I think just how much my grandparents created that foundation for what it means to be and also with my Indigenous identity, right? And so, again, I in that short article I shared with you, I have memories of going to visit them, and they didn't speak English. And so, but I would go into the house, and my grandfather, who was blind, I would walk, would go give him a hug, and he would feel my shoulders and feel my head, and every time, and he would pray over me. And then, and then when I left, it would be the same process. He'd go and he, envelop me in a hug and pray over me. And with my grandmother, she was less, a little more stoic, and she would always be sitting by the window. And again, I would go over and she never, I don't remember her necessarily hugging me, but I remember her always gifting me. And it would be with, sometimes she was one of those Indigenous grannies, always had like this, like a, I don't know, moose hide, rawhide kind of change person tucked in her bosom. And she'd pull out, sometimes quarters, sometimes rolled up dollar bills when we used to have those. And, but she'd sit at the window, and she'd always have under the table that she sat at, like this, I don't know, this wealth of, whether it be fruit or candy or, and again, as she got older, she started to get dementia, and she would sometimes gift me with things that, were like the orange would be rotten. But by then I knew instinctively not to refuse that gift, because to refuse that gift would be disrespectful to her and her acknowledgement of me, that respect of acknowledge me as a family member, as somebody who she loved. And that's how she showed love, and how I would reciprocate that by accepting that orange. And similar, when my grandfather would pray over me, is as a child, you learn not to squirm, not to pull away, and not, even though I didn't understand what he was saying, that you learned that by showing respect, you were reciprocating whatever he was giving to you in that moment.
Oh my God. I
yeah,
had tears, because I just feel that, wow, that just, I don't know why I'm emotional, but that you could feel that, how you were explaining that. Just got to gather my thoughts here for a second.
Yeah, no problem. But I think the emotion comes from, again, with walking in two worlds, what I really have gained from the Indigenous side of my upbringing is that heartfelt way that we walk in the world. And I think it does, when you walk in that way, it is emotional. It does bring the tears that on my dad's side, we were taught, don't show emotion, don't show. So it's, which I think is part of kind of the teachings that Indigenous people can offer the Western world, who I don't think necessarily always want to work in that domain. Like others are searching to be more authentic and have that emotion in their daily life. And I'm not saying all
uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
For some people, that when you talked about your grandmother or your great grandmother, not comfortable with the physical, but she had her own way of showing, and it just feels like you were so seen in that moment.
Yes.
Even, and somebody, your great grandfather who was blind, but you still felt seen.
Yeah.
Like that's just amazing to me that you were able to reflect on that now.
Yes.
Maybe not realizing that as a young child, but to be able to look back at that, what a gift you were given. And what a gift you gave them by allowing that, right? Like you say, you didn't pull away, even though you were young, but you learned that very soon. I always get the word wrong, but reciprocity.
Yeah,
I know the word, but I have a hard time saying it.
It's a tongue twister for sure.
It's always that, isn't it? It feels like it's always you're giving, you're taking, but there's I don't know. It just feels like such a beautiful gifting with each other, whether it be material or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, again, if you could take that one step further, that exchange, that reciprocity, again, in my teachings, I've learned that, again, from an Indigenous perspective, that is our responsibility, that reciprocity, not just with our human relations, but with the land and the trees and the spiritual realms, is that continual recognition of that, all of our relations that we're in this world with, and that if we pay attention and again listen, even though we're not understanding some of what nature or the spiritual aspects have to offer us, that we pay attention, and and paying attention means that's the reciprocity that we give to all our relations, and that's what creates the balance to the way we live our life. And that's then our responsibility, is to walk in balance with all our relations, with the practice of reciprocity. And gifting is the practice that then manifests that within our realities, our everyday lives.
Yeah. Well, the connection that we're all one too feels like that's a message as well, or that's what I'm taking, right?
Exactly. And that as humans, we are we're not more powerful than that tree that sits outside my window, right? Or the Mother Earth, or
the ocean.
Exactly.
I mean, everything, the air. Oh, there's so many, I'm sure there's so many ways that we can go with this. One of the other things that I loved was, and you just kind of touched on it, it was the tradition is intended to balance the relationship and to demonstrate respect for all things and all people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about the commitment that you have, and it's honoring your ancestors, the sacral laws, I think that you mentioned in that, like, how do you do that? How do you embody that? Is it something that you just know because it's in you, or do you practice it, or like, how do you pass that on to us and your generations to come? Like, can you just help me kind of understand that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And I, I'll be the first to admit that that's a work in progress for me. And most days I start off giving, kind of prayers and what I'm learning about prayer, again, from an Indigenous perspective, what I've been taught is that really that is about connecting. So my prayers are to the Creator, to a higher peer, but also to the spirits and the ancestors and Mother Earth and the trees. So that in that prayer, I'm recognizing all my relations right from the get-go. And if I can, the teachings I hear from elders is, as soon as you step before your feet hit the ground in the morning, you start acknowledging through the gratitude by thanking the day, looking out your window and thanking the day, the sun for rising, for the trees for being there to give you oxygen, all those things. And your home and your family and all of those things. And that in itself is connecting you again to all my relations, and that you're beyond just yourself. And I think if I can get in that, that's the first piece, is if I can start my day in that way, then I find I can be more cognizant and heart connected to the connections and the people and so it shows up, I think, Carrie, in ways that, again, if I go to work, and if I, again, cognizant, then when I walk into the building, or if I go get gas, I don't just do the transactional thing with the person behind the thing, but I'm making a connection. Good morning. How are you? Right. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Or, just again, that's how I think it shows up in the everyday. And again, at work, I walk in and I don't just get on my computer, log in and start with the tasks that are before me, but I'm connecting somehow with the people that surround me. And again, driving to work, I'm recognizing, like, what's the sky doing? Like, what's, those types of things. And I think that's, again, may sound really small, but I think it really does just start off that way. And I think then what I see with the elders who do that have that practice, then they just embody this connectedness and this goodness that people just want to be in there, be with them, right? And embrace. And it's just so that those elders, when you sit down and go to them, you just feel you can. It's just so accessible to, and I think that's how it shows up. And again, for me, that's what I'm working towards. But I have to say, most days I wake up and I'm thinking about my to-do list. So it really is a practice that's not. And I think, again, for some people who, again, elders who, live that life more traditionally, which I've been kind of, again, in those two worlds, it's somewhat easier.
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I can't make that as an excuse. It's a practice, just like
It's a
anything,
practice.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like anything. And what what I'm getting from that is you allow the person to be seen who's in front of you. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't think there's anything more special or than that feeling of being seen yourself.
Right. Mhm.
And you're giving that gift by seeing those people in your day-to-day transactions. And it could be a smile, it could be just looking somebody in the eye. There's so many ways that we can do that,
Mhm.
that we get busy and we get in our head. And
Yeah.
so I love that you say it's a practice. It's, you've been raised with it,
Mhm.
but you still need to consciously practice it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And by starting your day off like that, I can see how that grounding practice. I
Mhm.
mean, I've started meditating in the morning again because I really miss that practice
Right.
of doing that. And that's what that does for me. It grounds me and sets my intention for the day.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
when you go out into the world, people want to be seen. They want to feel like they belong. They want to be heard. And I think that's such a beautiful gift to be able to
Mhm.
give somebody.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
back into the gift,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
giving and receiving,
Yeah.
which I just love that. And
Yeah.
so much of that I love hearing from you because it's so um it's just a part of who you are, but we're all human.
Yes. Mhm.
And we
Yeah.
still, it's okay when we don't, we're not doing that all the time, but your awareness brings you back to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's been wonderful teachings from the elders too, is that, this notion of goodness, it's not a natural thing, and it's not, and we have to accept our flaws, because it's not
Mhm.
about being perfect.
Right.
It's
Right.
about learning, right? From
Yes.
those moments when our mind strays, and
Yeah.
yeah. So
And you also touched on that it's not necessarily just material stuff,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. Although I think, you know, I would say that, so some of those things I talked about are more implicit, kind of in your daily life. But I think, like, where you'll see the explicit practice of gifting show up is in our ceremonies, right? So in our feast halls, where
Mhm.
again, it's those explicit practice of gifting really is, where we're showing that we're living our laws, are living our values, those teachings. So I'll give you an example of that. Like in our feast hall, um, if we're hosting, my family is hosting, we bring in food, we feed people, which again is a common kind of cultural element. But we would have we'd have stacks of bread, crackers, fruit. So we give all that out so that we're those people in that our community, our families, they're going home with what we call sup, which is left, like, things to take home, and
Yeah.
they have enough food to feed their family for a week. And that again is, so again, we are gifting them because they are gifting us by showing up,
Yeah.
honoring and witnessing the work that we have to do, which is part of our culture and our tradition, like maybe raising a pole or giving out names. So in return, we reciprocate by gifting them with important things of gifting. And sometimes then it's things like, it might be blankets, or you know household items, or tools, or what have you, to
Mhm.
again, which would be special gifts for the particular families that may have supported you in a more significant way. So
Wow.
again, it does build, and some of those gifts, but again, they're all intended to support life, and
Yeah.
kinship ties and relational ties to our families and to our communities. And
And the thought that goes into those gifts
yes,
seem to
exactly.
be very important, right? It's
Yes,
the intention, but it's also there was some thought put into how that
yes,
can help the person.
yes.
And
And
again, honor comes to mind too, that word
yes, yeah.
is
And
honor.
preparation too, right? So again,
Mhm.
like I remember my granny, and I remember my aunties, and now, and my mom, and I'm starting to try, but they would have these rooms where they would always have the gifts, and sometimes they'd even have them labeled before, because again, as someone may have helped them out, they'll say, oh, so to again, to show, demonstrate, reciprocate, and acknowledge that. And to me, what I've learned, making that public in the feast halls, then again, is demonstrating the value of reciprocity and respect. So the gift becomes kind of inconsequential to what the exchange of relationship and respect for each other. But it is the demonstration of in a public setting. So, yeah.
And the feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
The feeling of it. I mean, is there a better feeling than giving somebody something?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
I don't know if there's a better feeling than that.
Yeah. And that's, again, like the book that I gave you, and that's, I love to be able, when I, see things that I think, again, I have a relationship with someone, I know they would, would value that, then it's to gift someone in that way. And it doesn't have to be a birthday. It doesn't have to be it's just, again, a gift of relationship. And it's very cool.
It is. Well, and I'm going to share a couple of the gifts that I've received from you, along with the book that I showed at the beginning, because I love it. But your gift of friendship, for sure. Your gift of mentorship, because I do really value your thoughts and your ideas. And I know I also reached out to you when I needed a reference letter.
Oh, right.
And the gift of your words in that reference letter, I still keep, because I made a copy for myself, because I thought, if I am ever feeling down, I'm pulling out that reference letter that Sharon wrote for me, because it just makes me feel so good. So I thank you for that. And I also, I absolutely have to say thank you for the best sticky toffee pudding that I've ever had in my entire life. And I was the biggest advocate for the Costco sticky toffee pudding, and it doesn't even hold anything compared to yours. So I see you doing what you say you're doing. So walking your talk, you are embodying that. And I just love that you've given me so many different realms. I mean, the material, the book, but the words you've given me, the feelings that you've given me, the food that you've given me. Like, I mean, you've given me every single thing that you've wrapped up in this conversation. So whether you're aware of that or not, when you look at it from my perspective, that's what you've given me. And every one of them mean as much as the other one, because of the thought that you put in to it when you chose to give that to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying that, because I guess I don't. I still, like I said, I still feel I don't show up in that way. I think, I think I'm still really, but when I compare myself to my mom, who's one of the most generous people I know, and other elders and people, I think, well, like, how do I be like that, right? But so I really appreciate that there's some hope that I am actually living those values. But I think, again, those are the ways, is that, like those letters, as you say, and, I worked in post-secondary for a lot, and lots of students have asked me to write reference letters. And I don't just have in my file folder the standard form where I change the name. I really, because I think you want to reflect the relationship and the strengths of people. And I think that's a wonderful way we can gift back. And so thank you for just making that even more apparent.
That's good. Yeah. I'm glad I can remind you of how amazing you are, because sometimes we all need that little reassurance that we're doing what we are setting out to do, right? And sometimes we forget to acknowledge the role that you're playing, right? Yeah. So if that helped you a little bit, then I'm happy to have done that. I also would love for you just to, we've got only like 6 minutes left, but I know that you do a lot of work for the foundation. I know this goes way too fast. Yeah. It flies by. But so you work with a foundation, and does this the giving come up, show up in this area as well? It must, because it must show up in every area that you're
Yeah,
involved in when you're dealing with the
yeah,
Indigenous peoples, right?
exactly. I mean, so I work for the Kwame Leyland Foundation, which works with 9 coastal First Nations on Vancouver Island. And I've been there just over a year. And before that, I was in post-secondary education, and which is when I wrote my doctorate on gifting, because again, I could see the value of, of the gifting process being so integral to the post-secondary context, for how we acknowledge Indigenous knowledge systems and try to create some equity with Western systems and say, hey, we have something to offer. And not only that also would be relevant to Indigenous learners, but all learners. But so when I moved to the world of philanthropy, to be honest, I was kind of like, I didn't even think of, gifting always is with me, but I didn't think how really those big concepts would translate. And then, of course, then when I get in, I'm like, of course, this translates, right? So the whole world of philanthropy is around, to do good, to be of service. And so there's lots of values that resonate. I think what's really interesting and what I'm observing in the philanthropy sector right now is that they're trying to move. They kind of got caught up in more of the transactional practice of philanthropy, where we give you money, and you're gonna you name a building after us, and then send us the report. So it's less, again, with those principles and values that I talked to around reciprocity and relationships, and really creating connection and sense of belonging for people to be of service together. And so that's where philanthropy is moving. So when I came and started learning that, I'm like, this is fantastic. Then all these values can translate and really, and so now in this new role, I'm really trying to capture in it, make it go translate, everything we've talked about. Like, so that's always the thing, is when you take anything from a particular cultural set, how do you translate that to other people and from other traditions? And so, but yeah, I think it has a strong place to hold, and I'm figuring that out, and I'm excited, right, about how we can further the concept of Indigenous gift giving in the philanthropic sector and lead with that.
Yes, and the role that you're playing in making that connection, so that it doesn't get lost in translation. You're still respecting and honoring where it started and what you learned, right? So you're bridging that gap of, you're translating it, but you're also doing it in a very respectful way, that it can be more of a togetherness, right? Rather than losing something in the translation.
Exactly.
Becoming something that it's not originally meant to be.
Exactly. And I think, just the one thing around truth and reconciliation, right? I think when the 94 calls to action came in 2016, people in the non-Indigenous, and certainly most recently with all of the horrific, stories of the grave sites that are being found, people are really, in non-Indigenous across the country, really are like, how do we activate the truth and reconciliation calls to action? How do we be of service? How do we be a good community person? How do we right the wrongs and not repeat? And I think, again, the world of philanthropy can offer that, because again, we invite you, and it's not just about offering resources, which is great, but it's about then, how do we be in relation? How do we reciprocate then? How do we, again, be in relationship so that you're learning, again, some of the values that are so important to us, and that then translate from your tradition. So it's, again, not about us saying our values are better than yours, but and that's what you have identified, right? With certain things that resonate. So, and again, even with cultural appropriation, it's not about us sharing our culture with people that, again, could be, because that's our culture and some of those teachings are sacred, but our values aren't sacred, because everybody has values, and that's that place of connection, I think, but we sometimes have to create that space such as this to unpack how those values and traditions came to be, so which also makes connection, but also distinction, which we want to respect, right?
So beautiful. It's like you're bridging a gap of a space in the middle to meet.
That's I think, that's my ultimate goal, is to Yeah. And I think that's, again, as I talk about walking in two worlds, sometimes, and again, risk of sounding super corny, that's kind of what I think my life path is supposed to be, right? Is bridging that gap. It's based on the beautiful teachings I've had from both my families. And
Oh, there's a phrase that I want to wrap this up with because and I don't know who said it, but it was, we're all here to walk each other home.
oh, I've never heard that. I love that.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful, that's what we're here for, is to walk each other home. And I feel that by having these conversations, we're just opening up the conversation to
Yeah.
see things a bit differently, to see it from a different perspective. And I also love that there's some things that you don't want to share because it is sacred.
Yeah.
And it is sacred for the Indigenous peoples. And I love that you honor that. Like,
Mhm.
we're going to share and you take what you want.
Yeah.
There's some that we're going to keep for ourselves because that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I just love that. I've absolutely loved this whole conversation. I wish we could just keep going and going. So, but we're out of time. So for those of you that are here, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to have a Q&A after with Sharon. And if you're catching the replay, thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you so much for sharing with us your wisdom and your knowledge. And everybody out there that's watching, always remember that you're more than enough as is. Thank you. And we will see you next week.